I come from Germany, from Halle, from the University Martin Luther and from the Department of Media and Communication. And I am a docent in film and montage. And since summer 2014, I'm diving deep into the future of the cinema, which is my PhD. And in my PhD, I consider the changes of visual dramaturgy in context of new technologies like stereoscopic 3D, spatial sound, 360-degree projection, high resolution, high dynamic range, virtual reality, and higher frame rate, and some more. It's important to consider because we need a qualitative use of the new technologies, not for a cinema of attraction, but to attract the audience with a qualitative narration, and of course also for the high immersive experience. In the next minutes, I'll give you an excerpt about one part of my PhD, about the study in higher frame rate, especially for spatial films like 3D, virtual reality, and Fulldome. So this part is also divided into 4 parts: in a 3D analysis, in a higher frame rate study, in a Fulldome analysis and study, and in a VR analysis. Especially for Fulldome, there are 2 parts: the Fulldome analysis done in May 2016 in Jena at the festival, and before that, a higher frame rate cinema study in the Light Cinema in Halle with a 96 native frames per second short film. Since nearly 100 of years, we are produce and show films in 24 frames or 30 frames per second. But with the digital revolution of cinema, we are able to produce and to show films in higher frame rate easily. For example, The Hobbit was in 48 frames per second, and Avatar in December 2018 will be in 60 frames per second, also in 3D without glasses. And in April, Ang Lee's film Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk will be shown in 3D, 4K, and 120 frames per second. And there's also Blade Runner 2049 coming to VR, but I don't know yet in which frame rate. And there's also some testing in projection mapping in 1,000 frames per second. Also in April this year, I was able to do a cinema study in a Light Cinema with the short film in 96 frames per second. It's not Fulldome, it's only canvas cinema, but canvas cinema. But I think you know how important frame rates are in Fulldome. It's the film Invincible. It's about a boxer and his path to decision, filmed with an ARRI Alexa in 96 frame rates per second native, and then transferred with an algorithm from Disney Research to 24 and 48 frames per second. It's the same film, the same setting, the same light, but different frame rates. To name some scenes, there's some dialogue in various shot sizes. There is some rain, some moving cameras, some moving objects, skin with beds of thread, and of course the boxing fight. After the screening of the film in 24, 48, 96 frames per second and in a variable frame rate per second, also in excerpts to compare, the audience filled in a survey, and in this I consider habituation, perception, feelings, perception of focus, visual quality, and visual rhythm, and also presence and immersion. And 102 people from 15 to 64 years, nearly half men, women, joined the study. 81% of them has the opinion quality in cinema does matter. It's important and very important. And for example, let's take a look at the habituation part. At the question, which frame rate do you like most? The people had the opportunity to choose various answers, and the most preferred the 96 frames per second, at least 47%. And only 24% preferred the 24 frames per second, 12% 48 frames per second, and 17% the variable frame rate version. Some words to that after. And at the question part, perception, for example, I take the question, how did you feel about the respective frame rate? And as you can see in the last gray row, most of them felt pleasant or very pleasant with the 96 frames per second version. The red one is the 48 version, and the blue one is the 24 frames per second version. At the part focus and quality, I asked, for example, what's your impression about the visual sharpness? And on the 7-point scale, they could choose between very unsharp, not in focus, to very sharp in focus. Most people felt that the 96 frames per second version was very in focus. 24 was in the middle field. And of course, I also asked about their feelings of the visual sharpness, and most felt pleasant or very pleasant with the 96 frames per second version. 96 was also the winner at the visual quality and the richness of detail. At visual quality, they can choose between not so excellent and to brilliant at all. And richness of detail, they can choose between not existent to very convincing. For the part immersion, I asked also various questions. For example, most people agree with the statement, I felt immersed in the film at 96 frames per second, up from little bit over yes to absolutely. And 24 and 48, again, only in the middle field. Also, more than a half of the people agreed with yes and absolutely to I felt like I could see more at 96 frames per second. There's also an eye tracking analysis from Miriam Lurcher from the Zurich University that revealed that high frame rates produced a higher number of fixations than standard frame rates. And now I bring an example. This made for me Jakob Laux from Joker Products. I bring two examples, one 24 frames per second example, and then we see a 60 frames per second example so that you can compare. I have also other examples on my laptop if you want to talk to me in the break. So fingers crossed that now the examples work. Okay, so we start. So this is the 24 frames per second. And you see it's juddering. It's not that clear. Okay, you've seen it? Okay. So now fingers crossed. So now we see the 60 frames per second version, I hope. Oh, I love the sound. Yeah, you see it. It's clearer, it's softer, it's sharper. It gives you a nicer feeling, I hope. Yeah, we can see this all the time, I think. Okay, thank you for the example. Yes, thank you. That's nice. So in the conclusion, 96 frames per second. The most people enjoyed 96 frames per second. Less than 1/3 were skeptical, and only 3 from 102 people really disliked it in the cinema. So it's only just a little thing getting used to 96 frames per second. It's brilliant in richness of detail, what is lost at 24 frames per second. Also brilliant in focus and visual quality. And there's no judder, it's clearer, it's softer. For spatial films, this means it gives more corporality to the things. You have a stronger 3D impression, for example. So you have a stronger impression of reality and immersion. It's good for the motion. There's also a study from BBC, Katie Noland. She figured out that non-tracked motion things need 140 frames per second. Then there is no juddering. Non-tracked motion, I mean non-tracked with the eye at the side, for example. And tracked motions elements need, in the technical way, 700 frames per second, not to judder anymore. So motion is motion is the key element in Fulldome, you know. And thank you. For real film, it means you need, if you have more frames per second, you need authentical actors. You see every failure. And you need authentical makeup, for example. And more content need more frames per second. And 48 frames per second is neither one thing nor another. So it's the question, the more the better. And there also is a EEG study from Japan. They with 240 frames per second. One moment. And they say the power spectral characteristics of the EEG in the case of a translating image stimulus at 240 frames per second were found to be closer to those in the case of a real translating image stimulus than those in the case of a stimulus at 60 frames per second. It could be considered that motion images with a high frame rate results in human brain activity that is closer to that in the state of viewing a natural scene. It appears that consequently the viewer is able to have a perception of motion image quality that is closer to the impression when viewing a natural scene. Greater spatial, temporal, and color resolutions are required for displays with capabilities approaching the limits of perception of human viewers. In view of the rapid advancement in image technologies, further investigation focusing on physiological functions of perception in human vision will be needed toward the realization of much higher quality motion images. This is the study from Japan. And also, I'm doing another study. It's a study about Fulldome films, about narration in Fulldome, and about the Fulldome elements. So it would be nice if you would join the study. I also have some flyers that you can take home. So yes, thank you. That's all.